The Utah Utes moved up a spot in the latest college football rankings edition, but there was something very interesting that happened behind them that should have Utah fans very concerned.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. It's your first time joining our show. Make sure you like and subscribe, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can download today. My name is JT Wistersill, excited to be joined by the host of Locked On TCU, Darrion Gray, coming on. We're going to talk about the college football playoff rankings, preview this Kansas State team, and talk about some other crazy things relating to the CFP. But Darrion, the reason I say Utah fans should be concerned, even though they moved up a spot, is Miami just jumped Vandy, and Vandy only had a bye week there. So I feel like this committee really likes Miami. They have a great win against Notre Dame, but they have two, I guess, bad losses isn't fair. I like Louisville. SMU loss isn't great, and I still think it's a solid Mustangs team, but they also lost to your TCU Horned Frogs and Baylor early on in the year, and Wake Forest, which is a really bad loss for them too. So I feel like this committee is looking for a reason to get Miami in, and if Utah doesn't keep dominating teams, I think Miami could very well leapfrog them in the near future, which does have me concerned.
The Miami love, though I understand it to a degree, I just can't see the ACC getting two teams in for as bad as that conference has been. And I think that there's a good chance that Miami will have to be an at-large team. The ACC has been too bad to have two representatives in while the Big 12 has one. And Miami jumping Utah, jumping BYU, like if they jump both of those teams for an at-large, that would mean that the Big 12 got one team in while the ACC got two. And I think a lot of people outside of the Big 12 probably get tired. Like, why you guys keep crying? Because I think there's a lack of respect for the conference nationally. This will be clear favoritism. And I think that it would be hard to criticize the Big 12 as a like a collective for being upset at seeing a conference that's been terrible. A conference that many people would say your representative doesn't even deserve to be in, even if they win a championship. And now you get two in. I can't do that. And the Big 12, or excuse me, the ACC is weird. I'm gonna say that real quick. I think North Carolina State and Wake Forest have beat some of the teams up top, and it just feels like there's no dominance. There's no dominance. There's no anything. So I'll stop there because we're gonna keep going. But yeah, I would be upset about it.
I don't like it. Like if I'm Vandy, I'm pissed. Like I think it's bull crap that we've had a bye week and we moved down. Like I know Miami looks decent, but also Vandy's losses, like I guess is the reason they moved down because the Texas loss doesn't look as good because Texas lost to Georgia. Like that just feels way too technical when we're getting to that point. So either way, that's just something that has me concerned. But Utah in at 12 right here. I'm not mad at this. I don't feel like Alabama should have fallen below a Utah. Yes, Utah has better losses, I'd say, than Alabama. Just the Florida State loss sucks, like plainly put right now. But Bama has 4 wins that right now are better than Utah's because Cincinnati does not look good right now. They've lost 2 games in a row, and the Arizona loss to a middle of the road Wildcats team when Cincinnati's trying to be a Big 12 contender is not a good look here. So I'm not mad that Utah didn't move up 2 spots like behind a Bama, and obviously they weren't going to leapfrog a BYU after they did get a good win. Not to pour salt in the wound, my friend, but I'm looking at this Utah team. I'm good with them at 12 right now. I think this is where they belong.
Yeah, I think this is appropriate. Texas moved down to 17. So you got that. I didn't think that Alabama would drop below 10. I said it on the squad show. They'll hear it eventually. Oklahoma winning was the worst thing for the conference. And I think it works for BYU, works against BYU and Utah because, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, I feel like the route to Utah making it requires BYU to lose in a championship game or lose at some point before and not make it. And then Utah has to win the championship game.
You're absolutely no. Cincinnati needs to beat BYU this weekend. If Cincinnati beats BYU this weekend, and we get some chalk, which counting on chalk in college football, such a great thing to rely on. But if there's a lot of things, if Cincinnati can just beat BYU this weekend, there's a very realistic path for Utah to get to Arlington. But with the way BYU is playing right now versus the way Cincinnati's playing right now, that's what has me concerned. But you hit the nail on the head, Darrion, that the Oklahoma. I want you to keep rolling because you're right. Oklahoma winning was terrible for Utah in the Big 12 this last weekend.
Yeah, I said it on the squad show. I think the Big 12 gets one team in. Unless something bad happens to Oklahoma. If Oklahoma loses or Alabama loses, let me see where these rankings fall out. So if 10 is Alabama, 9 is Notre Dame, 8 is Oklahoma, 7 is Oregon. I'm a little shaky on if Oregon loses this weekend, what they try to do, because I think that they're kind of a darling where people are going to overlook some things. I don't know. Maybe depends on how they lose. But 8, 9, and 10, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Alabama, if they lose, okay, cool. Everybody can be happy. And now you can move up and we have better conversations about the Big 12 making it. But if neither one of those teams lose, I don't know if a loss above them changes too much. The same way Alabama lost and then dropped down but stayed in the top 10. If Ole Miss loses in the SEC championship game, or if Texas A&M loses at some point, and it just the SEC is very odd. You don't know how it's going to play out. You don't know how things are going to be valued. It's so many moving pieces, and because things are subjective, there's no grounded criteria to say, okay, cool. Texas A&M loses to Texas, but then they win in the SEC championship game. This is what is going to happen. We have to understand that the CFP does not work as a tiebreaker system where the rules are laid out. It is, what do I feel? What do you feel? What do we feel? And that's the deciding factor in it all. And that's not going to work in the favor of the Big 12. It just isn't.
If BYU beats Cincinnati this weekend, it hurts Utah because that's their best win. And BYU also will pretty much be, they have UCF the last week. BYU is pretty much a lock for Arlington. That also hurts because not only does BYU win, they strengthen their resume and just keep themselves above Utah more than likely for the rest of the season, barring the UCF collapse. But there are other teams that have a chance to strengthen their resume. Utah really doesn't. Like, Utah has to keep dominating teams. That's what sucks if you're Utah. Like, you can't just win. You have to dominate. Now, they're very good at that. No one in the country is beating teams by a bigger margin on a per game basis than Utah, averaging 35 points per game in victories. But Utah doesn't have any ranked win opportunities coming up because Kansas and Kansas State have been so underwhelming. But you know who does have an opportunity? Georgia Tech and USC. Both of those teams could in a world get ahead of Utah if Utah looks shaky against a Kansas State. That is, Miami could jump them. Georgia Tech and USC both with big wins could jump them too. That's where it really sucks, where this Utah team feels like they're kind of in the middle right now, because Utah is expected to just keep winning. But if a Georgia Tech and a USC surprise us and they're only 2-loss teams, but they have a win better than a Utah, that puts this Utah Utes team in, unfortunately, a bad position. And I think the committee would allow some of those teams to potentially jump Utah if Utah stops passing the eye test with just straight A's as they have been as of late.
Yeah, no, I talked about this on my Wednesday episode where Utah has beaten everybody by 20 or more. Yeah. Literally, everybody they've beaten has been by at least 20 points. I think at least 21 points. To beat everybody by 3 touchdowns is absolutely ridiculous. I wanted to ask you this. You said that Cincinnati is the best win. What about Arizona State? Or is it sorry, Parker,
you know what?
backup quarterback conversation?
You know what? It might actually be that's a great point. It as crazy as it is, I still think that's just weird. I've just been thinking of Cincinnati's a better team than Arizona State. Right now, their best win is Arizona State. You're right. But that's where hopefully Cincinnati can beat a BYU and maybe get back in here. But I don't know. You're right, Darrion, though. It right now, I would lean towards, Arizona State's probably their best win, which is crazy for me to say. I don't know how Kenny Dillingham feels about that because he might have a foot out the door. We know Sam Levitt does, but that's a conversation for another show. But please continue, sir.
Does that change anything? Like, does that change your talking point? If the Cincinnati win is no longer the best win, do things change for Utah more favorably, or is it like Cincinnati, Arizona State toss up, still the same result?
Yeah, it feels like I don't think much does change unless Arizona State goes in and does something we don't expect to. What's interesting about Arizona State being ranked is they do have, they lost to Mississippi State. They lost, which I guess in some ways makes Mississippi State look a little bit better. That one of their wins is in the top 25 too, because they don't have many top 25 wins too. So you have them there as well. It's interesting. They did lose to a Houston team that, you mentioned the squad show. We do have a fun discussion about Houston coming up in that one. So it's just an interesting spot that Utah finds themselves in. And I'm fascinated to see how it all ends up shaking out. But one thing is for certain, Darrion, Utah has to take care of business against Kansas State this weekend. Darrion played Kansas State, and we're going to talk about what kind of a challenge the Wildcats could present in one moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel has your back because guess what? It's that time of year where we have NFL, NBA, college football, college basketball, NHL. It's all here and all in its glory. And with FanDuel, you can get in on the action because there is no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Utah Utes big favorites over Kansas State, 16.5 points. However you're feeling, head over to FanDuel to get in on the action. Kansas State has been a very interesting team so far this year, Darrion. They do have a win against the team you cover, the TCU Horned Frogs, but they also have some very strange. They lost to Army, which that loss is not aged well. Army is not like a G5 powerhouse by any stretch of the imagination. So it's just very hard for me to get a read on this Kansas State team. One thing's for sure, they've definitely underwhelmed. Like the fact that Utah's 16.5 point favorites, the fact that they are 500 with 2 games to go in the year is baffling to me. What do you make of just what a weird season it's been for Avery Johnson, Chris Kleinman, and the Wildcats?
I think teams like this are always dangerous and overlooked because I'm one of the people who, unless like Iowa State lost a lot of talent because they got hurt. So we lost, lost Iowa State too. But the point is that, and it's funny because actually I compared Iowa State and Kansas State going into the TCU versus Iowa State game. But teams who have high early season expectations, teams who are expected to be one of the top teams in their conference and then don't, they're always interesting because you know the talent is there most times. Most times you know the talent is there and you don't want to be the team that sees the talent all of a sudden wake up against them. And that's how I look at it. Avery Johnson is a capable quarterback. I think the difference between capable and good quarterbacks or any position really is that what do you do consistently, right? Like people can be flashes, right? You can be a capable wide receiver, but you're not a good wide receiver if you don't do it all the time. And this year, I don't think Avery Johnson has been good, but he has certain moments where he's athletic. He can escape the pocket. He has a lot of traits that no matter how down the Wildcats are, you have to watch out for them. If it's one thing I would tell Utah to look out for, one thing, turnovers. That's it. If you can protect the football, you will probably dominate this team. Because I watched it again in the game against TCU. Interception for a touchdown, fumble for a touchdown. The next week, I think they played Kansas and they dropped 40. I think they've only dropped 40 2 times. If I'm not mistaken, I think that Kansas State has only put up 40 points 2 times. And I know that's a high bar anyway, but both times they had defensive touchdowns. And you go through it, the games where they put up a lot of points, they tend to have a turnover or 2. So that's what I would tell them to watch out for if I was talking to the Utes.
Yeah, it's such an interesting Kansas State team, coming off a win, but it's 14-6 against Oklahoma State, who's been dreadful. Now, granted, what we are talking about with Kansas State, this team who has nothing to lose, like just being a dangerous team, that's what in some ways the Cowboys have become, but Oklahoma State is just bad. Like they are dreadful still. So it's not impressive that you barely win there. I know as much as Chris Kleinman felt like he was trying to make a little bit of excuses, which he's kind of been doing all season long. There's been weird energy coming out of that program a little bit with some of the comments he's made, but they did beat a TCU. They beat a Kansas. You lose to Tech, but they're actually in that game early on. So that was impressive, but they just lost earlier in the year. They lost to Baylor, lost to Arizona. We mentioned the Army lost too. So it's just been a weird team. And they clearly they do not beat the upper echelon teams in this conference. And that's what Utah is right now. They're one of the top teams in the Big 12. Their physicality is something to marvel at. Kansas State, they're not in the top 8 of offense or defense in the conference, which once again, it is surprising too. But let's talk about the offensive side of the ball first. You mentioned Avery Johnson. He has been incredibly inconsistent. He can make plays. Utah has had games at times too on the year where they've struggled with running quarterbacks. They did pretty good against Sorsby, but they've or dual threat quarterbacks should say, because Sorsby can throw it, although not great the last 2 weeks for him. But dual threat quarterbacks have been an issue for Utah at times. So I feel like that's where Utah just really needs to continue to tighten in on tackling athletic quarterbacks, and they should be fine here. Kansas State has a wide receiver I like offensively, but I don't think it's a great offensive line. The running game has not been outstanding on the year too. So I think the biggest thing for Utah is limit Avery Johnson on the ground, and you should have success in this one, right, Darrion?
It's literally the blueprint. It's literally, and don't turn the ball over, right?
Yes.
Like I think TCU wins that game if they don't have 2. I mean, most people who turn the ball over twice and they result in touchdowns, you're not winning the game. I think at TCU doesn't do that. The defense held up and then the levee just broke, right? Like you see 41 points, and if you don't watch the game, you just say 41 points, and that looks like a terrible defensive performance. I don't think that that's an accurate description. I think that TCU's defense played well early, and then once those 2 turnovers happened, if you felt a levee break. You felt like, okay, everything's flooding now. And that's unfortunate because then they started to get some things going. But early, they did a good job handling Avery Johnson. No, excuse me.
Well, you said Avery Johnson. You got it. You got it. Yeah.
Okay. It always confused me because I had to look it up multiple times. I always want to call him Avery Wilson. I think that's the singer. And then Avery Johnson, I think about, Avery Johnson. Like I think about the ball coach. So I was like, oh no, I got that wrong. But where was I going with that? Because now I'm thinking about names.
We were talking about Kansas State as their offense.
Okay. Yes. I didn't think they did that good in the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And it sounds like sour grapes to talk about a team that put up 40 on you and criticize their offensive performance. But I really don't think they did that good early. And I think that if TCU would have been more competitive, you would have seen a better defensive performance, more competitive offensively. You would have seen a better defensive performance as well. It just felt like some critical mistakes by the offense eventually took the spirit out of the team. But I don't think that defending this offense is complicated. It's stop Avery Johnson. You do that. They don't have Dylan Edwards. They don't have a running back who is going to scare you. Jackson can, he don't get me wrong, he can put up yards. He's not a bad back, but he's not scaring you. If you stop the quarterback, I think you stop the offense. And defensively, they don't do anything remarkable at Kansas State. Offense, defense, they don't do anything remarkable except for take the ball away. They do that phenomenal. They have 12 interceptions, 12 fumbles recovered. So like they do that great. That's it though. So protect the football and you're fine.
And how do you turn the ball over? Usually by throwing it. Darrion, I don't know if you saw the Utah score last week, but Utah absolutely hammered Baylor. It was like 55-28 basically. Guess how many passing yards Utah had in that game?
They had less than 200 if I'm not mistaken.
Darrion, they had like 100. They had 103. So what's the best way to not turn the ball over? It's run the dang ball. And this Utah team does it at such a high level. When Tech played this Kansas State team just a couple weeks ago, they ran for 187 yards on the ground. This is one of the best offensive lines in the country. This Utah team is the best running team in P4, the second best running team on a per game basis in college football. If you're Utah, it's run the ball. You want to get into a phone booth fighting away with this Kansas State team. Just make it a physical type of game, and it could get out of hand because you're keeping their offense off the field. You're keeping your defense well rested so they can make those tackles on Avery Johnson. If you're Utah, just keep running the ball because it's what's gotten to this point. And Kansas State, as you just said, Darrion, they're not outstanding at stopping it.
No, they're honestly, even coming on here, I'm leaving because I'm frustrated that TCU lost.
I can tell. You can tell. We're opening old wounds here.
It's frustrating because you start thinking about it. TCU's whole season has been frustrating. Check out Locked on Horned Frogs if I don't want to bring that. I don't want to bring that here. This is a pretty jovial situation. Let's keep it that way. But this just is a team that I struggle to tell you what to look for.
Yeah.
And that type of team should never put 40 on you.
No, they shouldn't. You're absolutely right. And it's just weird it's such a weird team when you look at them, because it's like you were supposed to be like this Big 12 darling this year. Almost everyone had them picked as like the second best team in the conference at one point in the year. It was like Tech won, then them, and Arizona State was in there too, right? Those like three were the three most frequent I saw. And Kansas State has fallen so far short that it's honestly hard to believe in some ways. So I'm feeling good about Utah rolling this one. Sounds like you are as well, Darrion, but it'll be interesting to see. One thing that's always interesting is we always get talks of just the college football playoff, the future of it, and even just some comments made by the committee in the near future I found very interesting. So we're going to talk about that in one moment as we wrap up this episode of Locked On Utes. Today's show is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. College football, college basketball, it's all back, it's all here, and it's all absolutely epic. And we couldn't be more excited to have it back too, right? The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's just nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at the checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking college football tickets as low as $10. And I'm talking P4 events too. You can take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. If you're tired of dealing with all the hidden fees, Game Time is the answer for you. We have a new head of the College Football Playoff Committee. This is his first time being interviewed by Reese Davis, which is always a mismatch because Reese Davis is a fantastic interviewer. And even though these guys are athletic directors, they always just end up saying something probably wish they could have back. At the very end, Reese asked him about, hey, how do you view conference championship games? And he said, well, it's just another data point that we use to measure a team. He didn't say oh yeah, just because you get in there, you're good. That's where it makes it very interesting. We talked earlier about the Big 12 having a path to get two teams in. If Utah gets in the Big 12 title game and they lose, and they even play a Tech very close, Darrion, I don't see how they get in because I think that loss is going to be held against them. They almost pulled SMU out last year. If SMU had gotten blown out by Clemson, I think they would have been pulled out. If BYU gets in this, even as a one-loss regular season team, they get blown out. They're not getting in. I think conference championship games can hurt you this year, possibly even more than they have in the past.
Yeah, it's always been said it's best to be the third best team in the conference sometimes.
Yeah, right now it is.
It's just best to be the third best team in a conference. And especially if you already have a shaky resume, right? Like if you're two undefeated teams going into conference championship, I think you're probably both fine. But Utah has 2 losses. You can't afford a third. BYU has 1 loss. I don't think they can afford a second, right? So if you're at a point where one more loss could make or break you, I can't even all the way say I hate the ideology of it working against you. I really can't. Now, if you're the second best team and you're clearly better than the third team, then I hate it. But I don't know if I've seen that happen at this point yet. A lot of times it's probably 2 and 3 being close. 2 has another loss, and now the resume looks worse. So it sounds bad. There's certain truths that you should just never say. And it's better unspoken. And I think that this is one of them where losing in a conference championship should be something that hurts you, in my opinion. But saying it sounds like you're rewarding people for not making it. That's why I say you should just, sometimes you just gotta hush, just gotta be quiet. But that's Reese Davis. He pulled it out of him.
He did. And you're right. It's just such an interesting thing. I don't believe a close loss should hurt you because it's you were playing in this game. If you want to say, hey, it's a negative thing because you lost, it's well, did they get rewarded because they didn't do anything? That's what sucks is exactly what you're talking about. It's I don't like the idea of, there's 2 things we both don't like, I think, right, Darrion? We don't like excusing losses if you lose in the conference championship game, but we also don't like rewarding a team for not doing anything either. And that's where this becomes tricky, right?
Yeah, because, and here's the thing. On paper, everybody would agree 2 loss versus 1 loss. I'll take the 1 loss team.
Yep.
I don't think anybody would argue if I just said that statement. Now, what happens when that second loss comes in the conference championship game?
Yeah.
Maybe it's case by case. Maybe you have a different answer than I have, who has a different answer than they have. Maybe that is legitimately a case by case basis because I don't think there's a blanket answer for that. I don't think that you can just say, all right, well, I'm trying to think. Let's just use the top 3 right now. Right now, it'd be Texas Tech, it'd be BYU, and it'd be Utah sitting on the outside. BYU loses to, this is hard because BYU and Utah actually played each other, but BYU loses to Texas Tech. And let's say they lose like they lost the first time. BYU and Utah are 1 spot apart. Would it be crazy to say that BYU falls below a Utah? If you're just stripping names away, I don't think it'd be crazy because I've seen how history works. But then you're sitting there looking like Utah's 2 loss, BYU's 2 loss, but BYU beat Utah, but Utah's ahead of BYU. And now it has people just scratching their head like, how does this even make sense? But you know why it makes sense? Because it's better to lose early in college football. That's the other thing. It's
It is.
better to lose early. If you lose early, everybody forgives, everybody forgets. No one cares that Alabama lost to Florida State.
That's just where I was going. Yep.
Not a soul cares. You know what? Notre Dame is still holding on. They're starting to break away from it a little bit with some quality wins of their own. But hey, look what you did early, and all those losses were early, but they were strong. You can, if you win strong, everybody holds on to it forever. If you lose strong and people like you, we'll move past it. So
or if they don't like you, BYU, you get penalized, right?
Yes. Because BYU is such a strange team.
They're so strange.
BYU is such a strange team where I think we should divide all college football fans into resume and eye test watchers. That's what I think. When it comes down to this point in the season, all college football fans should be broken up into two categories. Do you care more about the eye test or do you care more about the resume? And it feels like whatever you want to make an argument about at that moment, they'll choose, right? So BYU, solid resume. I don't think they have a huge win, but they've had a successful
Utah would be their best win.
Sorry, no disrespect. Utes don't hurt me now. But like they don't have the win outside of Utah where they don't have a list of big time moments, and it feels like you're sneaking by. Let me say this. Let me change that, right? Because that's a great point. BYU does not pass the eye test, not because they don't have a big win, but it just feels like they just keep getting by, and we don't reward just getting by in anything. You name it. The Jazz just get by. We're gonna say, I don't know. They just keep squeaking by, right? Like that's what's gonna happen.
They fired the GM.
Now, if you start blowing people out, like a who? Like a Utes,
Utah.
You're gonna be looked at very favorably because the eye test matters until somebody will say, well, what about resume? So I think we should just divide that. And, I don't have this deep dive on why it's important, but I do think it really does. Those two categories describe what type of football fan you are in college football.
They do. It's such a fascinating, there are so many different ways, data points we can measure these teams too, right? Like, let's go back to Utah BYU because it's a very interesting case study, right? Because yes, Utah lost to BYU by 3 in their house, 24-21. But let's also just talk about these teams on the season in general. Eye test wise, I think it's pretty clear that Utah looks better than BYU. There's a reason that all these football power indexes have Utah way above BYU. Some people could say, well, that's bias. Well, there's only 4 teams in the country who are in the top 10 of scoring offense and defense: Utah, Texas Tech, Oregon, and Indiana. You know what else all those teams are in? The top 5 in scoring margin. You know where BYU is? They're the worst of any team in the top 12. They are the worst team in scoring margin at 23. They don't pass the eye test. What you're talking about, Darrion, we give them credit for winning, but we look back at Utah hammered Colorado. Everyone's hammering Colorado. Why'd you only win by 3? Arizona, you went to overtime with. Okay, Arizona's solid this year, but if you're a top 10 team, you should win that game. You shouldn't need to go to overtime. So it's a very interesting and nuanced discussion, and that's what always makes this time of year so much fun as we get to dive into all of it. Darrion, real quick, Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, said he wants a 2014 college football playoff. I hate that idea personally. I already think and look, I love that Utah's in the playoff discussion, but Utah has warts on their resume, and I don't want to include even more teams with warts on their resume. I've always said 8 was my preferred number, just so like what happened to Florida State a couple years ago never happens. I thought 4 was too small of a number if we do have to leave out undefeated teams. But what is your ideal number? And like, to me, I said, I don't like 24. How do you feel about it? 24
is the max. Like, you can never surpass that. And at 24, no one can ever be upset. Someone will always be upset. Someone will always be upset. But I'm not listening to any gripes. Yeah. If you could not make a 2014 playoff, there's nothing you can say to me. So I just feel like that's ample enough opportunity. That's including, I don't know if the Pac-12 has any ranked teams this year. I don't even know who's in the Pac-12 anymore.
Pac-12. Right. I don't think they do have any ranked teams this year because Washington State, Oregon State, they've all underwhelmed. But I don't think, isn't the Pac-12, I don't think they're like officially a thing till next year.
Oh, okay. Well, those teams, I don't know. I don't know what they are. I love the TV deal though. I do like the TV deal, but that's neither here nor there. I like 12. I may put my cap maybe at 16.
Okay.
24, you're including so many people. The lover of football will always accept it. Like, the lover of football in me will always say more football. And I feel like I feel like two things to wrap it up kind of concisely,
Mhm.
as concise as possible. You give the option for the Cinderella team that everybody loves in the March Madness because you're going to have severe underdogs. Secondly,
Mhm.
I don't mind too much because I feel like it's all going to work itself out when you have a
Sure.
larger playoff field. So I get to watch more football. You get to have the Cinderella aspect of it because I think that's people love that, and I think the NFL wants to try to get that. I don't know if it succeeds in the way that NBA or excuse me that basketball does, but they'll try. And then at the end of the day, most times those teams aren't going to work out. Everybody fought for the G5 team. I don't know how successful it's been since the 12 teams. I know
Okay.
Boise State got beat pretty badly. I don't remember who it was before that. Tulane may get in. It's just representation of G5 programs increased, and I think we saw why people didn't really feel the need to put them in there. But then you have a USF or UCF, excuse me, a few years ago where you're like, man, they definitely should have been in. And I would love to know what they would have done that year. They went perfect. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess 16 is my cap. I'll say that. 16 is my cap.
Yeah, and it's interesting how people differ. Like, I like that the group of 5 gets in. So there's lots of discussions and debates you can always have about this. One thing is for sure, though, Darrion, what you mentioned, they're always going to be complaining, no matter where they let the team. If we find a way to complain in the 64-team field, like we did last year, there will always be complaining. But with you, my friend, there is always great analysis. So thank you so much for making the time to hop on. And please let everyone know about all the great things you have on, especially with Locked On Horned Frogs.
Yes, check me out, Locked On Horned Frogs. We're going through a different season than you are over here, but I think we're having a lot of fun on the show. Maybe not watching the games, but we're trying to have fun on the show. I try to create that environment. Thank you, JT, bringing me on. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. You do phenomenal. I'm glad that we got to finally work together because we've done a lot of squad shows together. Yeah. And I was accused of being too level-headed today, but I like that you're always level-headed. So I don't know. So I'm glad that we were able to get together and do this.
Well, I get called a lot of things on the squad show, so I appreciate you calling me level-headed for once, my friend. Make sure you guys give Darrion a follow on X as well. That's going to do it for Locked On Utes. If you're in the market for a second listen, check out Locked On TCU. They may need a new head coach potentially, but that's going to do it for our show today. We'll be back with you tomorrow, getting you ready for Utah versus Kansas State.